Probably the first question you're asking is why on earth are we even doing this exercise given the news about the Texas A&M potential merger? There are three main reasons. Firstly, a well-defined positioning and branding will improve your standing with A&M. Knowing your target market, their attributes, needs, decision-making criteria, and thereby how to best position the School of Law to make it relevant, compelling, and persuasive can only be of value in the eyes of A&M. Secondly, there's an old saying, plan for the worst and hope for the best. Too many assume the acquisition is a done deal. Of course it's not. There are several hurdles and approvals required to consummate the transaction. A strong positioning and messaging framework mitigates the potential fallout if the acquisition doesn't happen. And thirdly, there's work to be done today and tomorrow and next week. Even with the merger being approved in June of 2013, it will probably take 2 to 3 years before the assimilation is complete, just like it did for the Penn State acquisition of Davidson. Therefore, the shelf life for this branding and messaging strategy is going to be at least 3, potentially even 4 years. So let's move on. One of the challenges in branding and positioning the School of Law is the varying needs of the different stakeholders. Several are outwardly focused. Admissions, communications attract the prospective student. Career services must meet the needs of the legal community's job hiring requirements. Alumni and community relations are focused on fundraising. Faculty has the curriculum and program development to consider, and obviously every staff and student is ultimately an ambassador of the school. Ultimately, it's less important what we think of ourselves and more important how the outside perceives us and their needs in hiring new law grads. Therefore, with this end objective in mind, the process started with a survey to attorneys. The goal was to garner at least 100 respondents. We attained over 250. We surveyed attorneys in Tarrant, Dallas, Collin, and Denton counties, who were influencers or decision makers in the hiring process. We then collected discovery briefs from several stakeholders within the School of Law. The next step was a facilitated strategic workshop with all the key stakeholders invited. The primary objective was to arrive at a consensus of our target audience, competitive assessment, and to figure out the decision-making criteria each stakeholder faces with their specific audience. The strategic goal was to speak with one voice, with a clear agreement on our value proposition and brand. About midway in the process, we debriefed with the dean and others. We then subsequently conducted a survey of the faculty and received their input as well. With the findings assimilated, we arrived at a positioning, developed a messaging framework, and created a series of tagline ideas. These were narrowed down to 5, presented to the dean, who selected 3, which were then taken back to interested stakeholders to find which works best across all the differing needs. Once the final tagline was selected, key messaging points were developed. All in all, it was a 12-step process, arriving at today's presentation to faculty and staff. So here are the highlights. The survey of attorneys was enlightening to say the least. 3 top takeaways. 1. A significant segment of the legal community is tired of kids these days, who want it all now, handed to them, perhaps best typified by the average SMU grad. Number 2. The legal community values experience above all else. Over 50% valued experience over the reputation of the law school. All good news for Texas Wesleyan. Thirdly, the legal community is appalled by the lack of good writing skills and professionalism of many grads. Bottom line, they want maturity, skills, and experience. Professionals who are practice ready. Makes sense. The pressure is on to do more with less. Time taken in training is lost billable time for the new hire and the attorney training. The more experienced the freshly hired attorney, the faster they can be deployed. This is a tremendous opportunity for Texas Wesleyan and a real point of differentiation in your offering relative to other universities that you're up against. Which leads us to your competitive differentiation. Your competitive envelope varies against the different schools you face. We took the 6 major decision-making criteria into account: reputation, location, relationship, the totality of your offering, ease of doing business, and price. Your competitive set included Baylor, St. Mary, Texas Tech, South Texas, SMU. We grouped OCU and Tulsa together, being pretty similar, and then clustered other national competitors together. The solid yellow line on the graph represents Texas Wesleyan School of Law and who you actually are. Of course, there's a difference in actual and perception, and the dotted line depicts who you're perceived to be. So let's look at the two law schools you face most frequently, St. Mary's and South Texas. Against St. Mary's, your competitive envelope surrounds them or matches them in 5 out of 6 criteria, with the totality of your offering, relationship, and ease of doing business showing the largest points of differentiation. Against South Texas, your competitive edge lies in cost and relationship, while they may have the edge in terms of location and reputation. Your competitive differentiation will vary depending on who you're up against in any given situation. So now to positioning. The key here is to define your unique space in the marketplace. It needs to be credible, defendable, and sustainable. At the nucleus of your positioning are 3 factors: location, your offering, and the investment. Since you're in downtown Fort Worth, you gain a tremendous advantage over a Baylor or Texas Tech. Your students have access to an astonishing array of legal opportunities, everything from the 2nd District Court of Appeals to EEOC, from the Department of Justice to premier legal firms. Which leads us to the second element, the practical difference. Texas Wesleyan School of Law brings on the practical difference. In other words, it's not just about theory, which some law schools focus on. No, you combine theory with the practice of law, non-simulated in a top-tier legal environment. Then we layer in a third ingredient, the investment. That, coupled with the location in your offering, generates a high-value, differentiated positioning and value proposition. Which leads us to your new tagline. A tagline works in conjunction with your name and will be rarely far away. It adds a qualitative element, since your name, Texas Wesleyan School of Law, already tells us what you do. So here it is, Texas Wesleyan School of Law. Real, rigorous, remarkable. It was decided that this finalist works universally as well as for each stakeholder that faces the external, be it admissions, career services, alumni, or community relations. Also, from a marketing point of view, it's the most extendable. So what makes you real, what makes you rigorous, and what makes you remarkable? Each of the 3 facets have primary and second messaging that act like pillars for the 3 components. So let's start with real. As stated in your positioning, it's about real experience, not just theory. It's not simulated practice, but you're practicing, real practice in a top-tier legal environment. The second message is your real faculty. You're grounded, you have practiced or are practicing in the real world. Real situations, real cases. And several of you are already published. Real grounded faculty. Leaders, if you like, in the practical. And the third element is, of course, a real and reasonable investment. So in terms of real, the primary messages are real experience, not theory, real faculty, and a real reasonable investment. The secondary messages are the fact you have real students, students who actually have some experience in the real world. It wasn't just handed to them. They had to work at it, even perhaps to come to the law school. They're grounded, real students. And of course you're real in the sense of your downtown Fort Worth location, a very real, down-to-earth city. On to rigorous. The most obvious is your rigorous curriculum. Beyond the main core curriculum are your required courses for graduation. You dig deeper in key areas, so it's rigorous in that aspect. As mentioned earlier, the survey yielded concerns over writing. You have a very rigorous writing program. So rigorous curriculum, rigorous writing, and rigorous professionalism are the 3 primary messages. Secondary messages include your certificate program and some of the other professional skills buildings you deliver. Remarkable. Texas Wesleyan School of Law is remarkable. First, the practical difference combined with your location and programs such as the Law Clinic program. Second, the remarkable contributions of the school and your students. The Law Clinic, of course, is an obvious contribution to legal justice. Millions of dollars worth of pro bono contributions made by the School of Law. Truly remarkable. And the third element of remarkable is your students. The fact that every single student gives at least 30 hours of pro bono time, with your top student last year giving 440 hours. That is indeed remarkable. A remarkable offering with remarkable students taught by a remarkable faculty in a school of law with a noteworthy history, starting off as a night program in a convent in Irving, arriving at today with your astonishing advocacy programs and leadership development. Yes, Texas Wesleyan School of Law. Real, rigorous, remarkable. So what does this look like in a verbal conversation? Well, one starts with the problem, something like this. Research indicates that law firms are fed up with law graduates with a sense of entitlement. They want to hire new attorneys that have maturity, skills, and experience. Texas Wesleyan School of Law is the practical difference. Its location in downtown Fort Worth gives students unique access to practice law in a non-simulated environment. Real law, real practice, a rigorous curriculum, remarkable students and faculty, all within a reasonable investment. That's Texas Wesleyan School of Law in about 40 seconds. So how does the new messaging and branding play out in creative execution? Well, the tagline has been approved, as we've already stated, and soon you'll see banners like this flying around downtown Fort Worth. The new JD prospectus already has the new tagline, and it's using some of the new messaging inside. These are just two creative executions already in motion. But real, rigorous, remarkable really lends itself to a lot of creative development and extensions. Here's just one concept idea. Profiles. Profiles of remarkable students or remarkable faculty. In conclusion, your defined positioning, branding, messaging, and tagline, real, rigorous, remarkable, possesses creative extensions that serve you well to really powerfully and persuasively position the School of Law in the minds of the legal community, the prospective student, or for fundraising.